Rebecca Harrison is the founder and creative director of Flighty Felon Games, currently making Freeride, and a mother of two. So everybody, welcome Rebecca to the stage. You can either hold this or flip it.
Okay, can I just talk loud?
And that's for the people in the room.
Oh,
So
hello.
They won't hear you at all.
Okay,
Despite
then I will speak into the microphone. Okay, arrow keys, lovely. Hello, everybody. Hope you're having a wonderful day so far. Nice to see you, nice to see you. Yeah, that's me, Rebecca Harrison, and I will get to it with arrow keys now. So my talk today is about adding a little whimsy to your game and to your life. 'Cause I think that is the most important part of any game is whimsy, or more specifically, an extraordinary moment of delight. So I believe that is at the core of every game, is that, you're just, playing along, and then something really interesting happens. And then later on, when you're talking to your friends about the game you played, you don't talk about, the hours of grinding or this or that. You talk about that one moment of delight. And that kind of is what comes to categorize and define your game, is that one moment. And this comes up to my first prop, which is this Count of Buble that I opened earlier in the evening. So I opened it, and then under the little tab, it said, "Yo." And that I thought was really magical. I was not expecting it, and I thought it was whimsical. So that, I think, captures what I'm about to explain over about a lot more minutes than that. So who am I? I am Rebecca Harrison, studio founder and creative director, and several other things. That's my studio, Flighty Felon Games. So this is a montage of my game dev life. Before that, I was a dental hygienist, and then I did a backflip into this. But that one up there with the two birds is the first game I ever made for a game jam. So that was a lot of fun. And then all of these are jams that I've made here in the city. That's my son James, he's cool. And these are our two commercial games. SCP Doki Doki Anomaly, which is an SCP dating sim. I'm really proud of that one. It's actually really fun. And that's our game that we're working on right now, which is Freeride. So I make games, several games. But what do I know? How do I come upon this fabled game dev knowledge? So my game design mentor was Will Wright. He made several games that you might recognize. I was actually his art director in San Francisco for a couple of years. And so I just sat there and listened to him. Everything he said, I was like, tell me your secrets. And it was very interesting because everything he did in a game design sense went through this filter of, but will I laugh while doing it? So if there's a moment in a game that could have been tee-hee, then he would go for it. It didn't matter what it was. You'll see. Yeah. So and there was three main ways I've determined. But yeah. So this is his thing that he'd always say: make toys first, then the rest of the game. So if your gameplay is engaging enough that you're just doing it while you're testing, you're just playing the game, you've got it. And you need to keep iterating until you've got it, whatever that is for you. So in other words, create systems which spark delight by searching for moments of surprise. So you'll know when you've got it. You'll know it because you'll be smiling at your screen and you'll be like, oh yeah, here we go. Now we're talking. How do I add whimsy to my game, you ask? I have determined there are three ways. There's probably more, but situational, mechanics-driven, and narrative-driven. So situational whimsy. I believe this one is probably the easiest and the most doable in a game jam because it just requires a fun premise. So basically take a familiar situation and turn it on its head in some way. And so I've got a couple examples from jam games that I've enjoyed throughout history. The first one is called Your Average Lift Experience. And it's literally just you and a guy in an elevator, and there's quick time events. And you're like, no, I will not press the button for you. And then he goes to press it, and you're like, handshake. And then you just stand there really awkwardly. And then it becomes more intense. He's like trying to fight his way past you, and you're like swearing at each other, and you're doing these quick time events. And I remember this game years later. I was like, what would be a funny game to put in this presentation? And it was like this, like, it looks very simple, but it was very memorable because it was just moment after moment of whimsy. Let's see. Next one is Tongue Tied. Is another jam game where your tongue is stuck to a pole and you gotta like eat these orbs. And there's hijinks. There's like this saw at one point. He's like, oh god, it's cut through my tongue. Oh no, it fell off. It's like the premise of like having your tongue tied to a pole. I have no idea what the theme could possibly have been, but I really enjoyed this game, and I was like smiling the whole time because it was so dumb. So that's one of those. This one was actually made by a local, Matt Welk, where you play as this dog, and you have to keep your owner alive despite their best efforts, and you have to like bark away at rats, but like when your owner goes down, you have to give them dog CPR. And it was really fun. It's actually a really good game. It's just all of these are on itch, by the way, for free. So if you want like a masterclass of like dumb games on itch, this is good material. Other dumb games on itch that I really enjoy and also have situational whimsy are How to Make a Cup of Tea. Has anybody played this game? Yay! It's because I showed it to you. It's literally exactly what it sounds like until it isn't. And the other one is A Firm Handshake, which is also the same kind of thing, where you just go up to someone and you shake their hand, and then it gets weird. But yeah, so like there's a lot of really fun experimental stuff on itch.io that like, I don't know, like ask me on Discord for game recommendations for this sort of stuff. They're always fun. But yeah, so that was the first kind of like way to like make a whimsical experience, is just like take a situation that's familiar to you in your life, whether that's like riding the bus or playing on the beach or making a video game, and then find some way to make it unexpected. And then your player will be like kind of going down that journey with you, where they're like, okay, we're doing this, we're doing this. That's interesting that you should do it that way. And they'll remember that. It's just that moment of whimsy that makes a game memorable. Mechanical whimsy. So this is usually, in my experience, systems interacting in an unexpected way. So having mechanics that affect one another is a base tenet of game design anyways. So you have your one mechanic, you have your other mechanic. Let's say you're, Link in Breath of the Wild, and you've got your sword, and you can put it on the ground, and it's made out of metal. But there's also the electricity system, where like you put your sword on something electric, it becomes electric, and then you can put your swords down, and you beat that one shrine that way by like having a wire of swords that are put together in that way. And I always remember that shrine because I was like, ha, I'm a genius, even though that was the one way that you could possibly beat it, and like everybody did it. But I felt smart, and that was important to me. But here's a couple of other ways I have noticed this in games. This is a game called Fallums, another jam game. The Tetris board is also, and then you can go down into like Tetris land. But like you're all like you see it, you're like, ha, that's funny. And that's all we can hope for as game designers, is that your player is sitting there and they like kind of like breathe out through their nose like, that's it. You've made it. But yes, that's Fallums, one of the all-time greats. I had to bring it up. Has anybody here played Outer Wilds? Okay, you should play it. I know everybody says you should play it, but like you really should. So this is like the definition of mechanics-driven gameplay. The premise is you're like a little astronaut. You have a completely physics-simulated ship, and you have to explore this strange solar system, and it gets weird. But so here's one particularly memorable situation where two things come together in a very interesting way. So this is minor spoilers for Outer Wilds, okay? Minor spoilers. So there's this thing called the quantum moon. And you can never land on it because it's quantum, which means that it's only like stable when it's being observed. And so you fly up to it and you go into its cloud layer, and then you're in space again because it stopped being observed. And so the way you actually eventually have to land there, and they trickle feed like clues at you, is you have to take a picture of it. Because you have this scout mechanic, which is entirely different, where you can shoot a scout into space that takes photos as it goes, and you can make sure you get a photo of the moon and then keep it open on your dashboard like that as you fly into the clouds, and then you can land on the planet. I always thought that was like the coolest moment out of a game with like a million cool moments. So like once again, play the game. And also, that's another example of a game that I really like its physics system. I'm a huge fan of physics-based games. I find that they just go a huge way to making a game more interesting in general. We're also like, we're human beings. We really like to watch balls bounce. It's like part of us. We love moving objects and watching the moving objects interact in funny ways. So this is a really good GDC talk. I have no idea when it's from. It must have been from years ago. But it was about emergent storytelling in Slime Rancher, mostly due to their physics system. And so this was a clip from the talk where this guy had two pens. One pen had chickens, and one pen had slimes. And the slimes kept jumping into the chicken pen. And the guy, there's a streamer who's talking over the original video, and he's like, these slimes are intelligent, man! Like, they're jumping into the chicken pen, like, they've figured it out. But in actuality, the developer is like, yes, so the slimes are sphere colliders, and they move towards chickens, and they jump every once in a while. So they were piling up, and the top one would just jump, and it would be moving towards the chicken. But it feels like they're like this zombie horde of pink slimes that are trying to get these poor chickens, when really the guy should probably just move the chickens. But that's and there's another layer to this later on in the talk where there are flying slimes, which can pick up a slime, but that slime also picks up the slime below it. So we have these columns of flying slimes, and that would just like, they would just hover around, and the guy was losing it on stream. So like that's the kind of thing, like when a mechanic can interact with other mechanics. So like the slimes are physics based. They can jump. They like chickens. Things happen. And so this guy on the floor here is an example of that we'll get to later. And so the last way I'm going to talk about making Whimsy, and this is probably the most difficult in my opinion, because you have to be a really good writer, is narrative Whimsy. It can still do it in a jam. I've seen it done. But a really good one is actually sports. Sports is really fun to watch sometimes. You know what I mean? But yeah, so sports, and like a really good story is like World Series comebacks. You know, you got your team, you got your guys, you're rooting for them, but they're losing. But then they start winning, and it's exciting, and that's what people like about sports, I think, among other things. But yeah, like games, sports is a lot of staring at a screen, waiting for something really exciting to happen. A moment of whimsy, if you will. And there are tools you can use to make this easier on yourself. So this is called the Hero's Journey. You may have heard of it. Has anybody here heard of the Hero's Journey? Yeah, good job, literacy. But so the premise of it is, so you start at the top, and then you go to the bottom, and then you go back up to the top. And so basically the premise of the story is the main character has a change in perspective. So you start off, everything is normal, and then you leave your comfort zone, and then you go down into the strange. In like Lord of the Rings, this is Frodo's journey. This is going through the mines of Moria. Like this is, and you're down there, and at the very bottom is, I've seen it called Ordeal, Death, and Rebirth. I've also seen it called Meeting the Goddess, which is the moment where everything changes. And the protagonist is forever different. And that is a moment of whimsy, I believe, not only for the protagonist, but for the audience if it's done correctly. Because you're on this journey, if you're doing your writing well, you're on the journey with the protagonist. You are empathizing with the protagonist, and you have that moment of, oh, this is what I need to be to solve my problem. I wasn't what I needed to be before, but now I can go back to the regular world, changed and capable. And so that, I think, is a really cool tool. And there's like tons of videos about this on YouTube where it'll go through like a great movie, And then it'll be like, these are the things that they did to make this movie like a hero's journey. Almost every movie is the hero's journey. The Matrix is a hero's journey, like word for word, point for point, hero's journey. So yeah, check it out. And it's not a talk by me if I don't bring this one up. Yeah. This is like the quintessential like whimsical twisty journey of like character development. Because yeah, the plot is super straightforward in Undertale. I don't know if anybody doesn't know about it. The premise is you're a human, you fell into a hole, and you have to get out of the hole. But there's monsters in the way, and you can either choose to hurt them or you can choose to not hurt them. And that's the whole game. But it's the characters that make it so engaging, because you're never quite sure, you haven't quite pinned down what anyone's intentions are yet. You're alone in this weird world, and things are attacking you, so you don't quite know. And so this is the second character you meet in the game. Her name is Toriel, and she is blocking your way. And she's kind of like, she's the tutorial, so she's like taught you how to like, engage with the mechanics of the fighting. And she's taught you that you have to, whittle someone's health down before you can spare them and they can leave. And so you're doing that like she's a Pokemon or something. And then suddenly something happens and you just do ludicrous damage. Just absolutely ludicrous damage. And she dies. And so that's the first moment of like, it's not necessarily whimsy, but like it's something very, very close. It's like the negative side of whimsy, which I think is fascinating. And then they keep doing it with every single character you meet. Like there's this skeleton and he's kind of like hokey but menacing, and you fight him. Then he's like, okay, I'm done fighting you now, goodbye. And then you go on a date. And I'm not sure what the egg is for, but I don't know. And it's Wednesday. And then you meet another character, and she's super, super menacing. And then you go to her house and you cook. You're like, it's the dumbest like experience of your life. And then there's other things that happen, which you don't expect. But yeah, so I want to give you guys an example, something that I have done that I feel kind of encapsulates this. So like I'm not just talking out of my rear end. So this is the first iteration of my game's main enemy, the slug. There's not a lot to it. You may note something is missing. Some key design element is missing. And my husband's like, what if you put googly eyes on it? And I was like, yes! 1,000,000 times better. Yes, it's like, okay, you know what? Now we're cooking. Because I put them on it, and I showed it to my husband, and he's like, yeah. And I was like, yeah. And that feeling, you're like, that's it. That is it. And so in our game, the main mechanic is physics. You can pick up and throw any object. That was the point of that whole prop. I brought it here just for that. And so, yeah, you can see that they jump at you, and they stick to you, and then you pick them up, and then you can use your telekinesis to throw them around, and they splat on any hard surface. So they're actually like, it's funny because they're not super menacing one-on-one, but they can actually become a huge problem. Also, so yeah, like this is like a couple of them, attacking at the same time. I'm holding my own, but only by doing something really stupid, which I'll explain in 1 second. So when we were making the game, we wanted to have a healing mechanic. So you have something in your hand with the telekinesis, you press C to consume it, and it heals you. And so the question was, what happens with like demons or furniture? What happens if you eat one of those? And I was like, I just, on my computer screen, on like the health, like it was like 1, 2, 3, like health refill. I'm like, I put a negative sign in front of the 1. So you can absolutely eat them. And it's a legitimate strategy in the game of just like, I'm being overwhelmed. Garble, 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 garble. I mean, it can also go poorly if you eat too many, and there's too many, and yeah, so that's the mechanical part of their like whimsy. There's also a section in the first act of the game where you pick up this bow, and then The giant one. And it's like, it's the easiest boss fight. I don't actually show you the whole boss fight. As soon as you pick up the giant slug, the fight ends and the door opens. And like there's like boss music and everything, and it's like and it's the dumbest boss fight in history, and I love it so much. Yeah, that guy. And then you can put that in your inventory, and then you can pull them out and you can give it to people, and they're like, ah! Or you could eat it, and it basically kills you instantly. So it's like that's the sort of thing where it's like every step of the way, you're like, how can I make this even dumber than it was before? But yeah, so that's more or less my talk of like how you can add whimsy to your jam games this weekend. Is like whenever you're making up a mechanic, like you're talking to that guy Simon about his castles, like, okay, I've got this block over here, I've got this block over here, and one great way to make Simon's life easier is, how can I just make it so these two blocks interact? Because then you can throw out a bunch of other blocks that you would have had, because those two are now fun. So it's like, just make your life easier and use fewer stuff, but make it funny, is my advice. Happy jamming.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rebecca.